forces behind a sketch of New York.
We're forces.
The forces.
We're forces.
Powerhouses. Do you guys ever run out of breath?
No.
Okay.
I'm a dynamo of pure energy.
It is a talent of yours.
No, I kind of have to. I don't necessarily run out of breath, but mostly through training because, my God, I have to do a bajillion things.
Yeah, there are rehearsal days where you literally talk for 8 hours. So,
every 3 weeks.
No breaks.
That's just another day at the proverbial office, you know?
So you have been running a sketch of New York for over a decade now, right? And
not quite yet. Not quite yet. We are in our 10th year. We have been doing it for more than 9 years. 9 years and 2 months, at least at the time of recording.
And it's a nonprofit company.
Yep, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated specifically to empowering and enabling the New York theater community, the thing that made New York City the theater capital of the world once upon a time. Wednesday doesn't help at all.
Well, on behalf of all the actors who have shared your stage, I am acknowledging that actually, and I thank you for sharing your stage with us and let us just be ourselves and have fun. And
well, I appreciate that, but let me push back on it a little bit.
Yeah, thank you guys, because we literally couldn't do what we do without you.
Without people like you, driven, ambitious, professional people who want to do good work and think that we are work worth doing, we could do whatever we'd want. As far as I'm concerned, I should be thanking you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
We only get to do this because people have been showing up for almost a decade and always said, yeah, I want to do that.
We both need each other, right? To make things
I'll accept that.
Both parties.
It is a collaborative art form.
It really is.
Exactly. You've been doing the Renaissance Fair for how long?
On and off, yeah.
We were at the New York Renaissance Fair for 10 years. We both became directors there. We're no longer associated with that fair, but we are both independent acts now on the Ren Fair circuit. It's more her thing than mine, I'll admit. I do some. I have an independent act. I sing queer sea shanties as a pirate queen.
I want to see you out there more.
Yeah, but it's more her thing. Darien is the national independent touring act.
Yeah.
Her act is religious satire.
Yes.
She plays a Puritan, basically a Ren Fair era version of the Westboro Baptist Church.
Yeah.
And religious satire / political commentary. Darien is the living embodiment of everything that happens on Thanksgiving when you eat way too much turkey and then fall asleep listening to your hyper-religious and increasingly drunk aunt scream at you that you are going to hell, and then you have a nightmare. Darien is what you have that nightmare about.
Yep. I do the face, and I do the voice, and I take the glasses off. I wear contacts when I'm performing. And you should always believe, you know how Superman and Clark Kent, people cannot tell they're the same person. I've had multiple conversations with people where, you know, I'm in civvies and I'm in glasses and I'm just talking to them normally. And it takes like an hour for people to go, are you the Puritan? It's so where my friends will like wait for it at this point, that moment of recognition.
Darien is a very big deal celebrity to a very small and incredibly nerdy subsect of the populace. You have merch now.
I do have merch now.
She's a big deal.
I'm doing, I started doing that character at the New York Fair in 2014. Did that all the way up until lockdown, and then 2021 when stuff got going again. I decided not to come back to the New York Fair for like multiple reasons, one of which was still COVID. But somebody we knew from that fair had since started her own fair in the interim. And as soon as I announced I wasn't coming back to that fair, she was like, "Hey,
you're a free agent? Oh shit.
I've got a one weekend fair going. Do you want to come?" So that was the first and only fair I did in 2021. But from that, when I was doing that weekend, some guy with like a guitar came over and was like bothering me in character all day. Like at the end of the day, I glare at people on the way out. And he was like standing next to me playing a song on the guitar at me. It was
very much at you.
He improvised a song about me. And then as soon as gates closed, he said, "Hi, I'm TJ. I'm the entertainment director at the New Jersey Renaissance Fair.
Okay.
Do our show next year." And that's been basically how it's worked ever since. I have done that, and I've met people, so I'll be like performing somewhere, and then somebody else comes over and says, "Hey, I run this fair. Hey, I run that fair." I've been operating by vampire rules coming where I
Yeah, you really have.
which is really awesome. I applied to a couple of new fairs for the first time this year. Applied to places that I didn't already know people in.
And get invited,
yeah. And I got into one new fair this year so far, which is really exciting. This year, my schedule is going to be, far as I know right now, 4 weekends at the New Jersey Renaissance Fair, 2 weekends at the Capital District Renaissance Fair, 3 weekends in Maine. A lot of the shows I do are adding weekends, so just
you're going to be busy this year.
Oh my god.
Wow, look at that. Good for you.
Yeah, the new show this year is I'm going to be doing 3 weeks at the beginning of October. It's their last 3 weeks of their run at the Maryland Renaissance Fair.
Which is a big deal.
Yeah, they're a really high-profile, prestigious
fair. Very
fair,
exclusive.
So I'm very excited to get into that.
You're in the big leagues, baby.
I'm going to be doing... I just got an email from Jimmy at Sparta. I'm cleared for Sparta this year. Sparta, New Jersey for 3 weekends. A lot of our friends on the independent act circuit will do this for, months at a time, or even the full year. At this point, we know people who are on the road full time, which is really cool, but I love Manhattan, so I don't want to do that full time.
Right.
It'll take you away from our show.
Yeah. I like having the flexibility, though, because between our show and Ren Fair stuff, I'm able to make a survivable living, which means I don't have to do fairs that other people only do because they're the only things running at that time.
Your vacation is?
Yeah, my vacation is 6 weeks in New Orleans at the end of the year. Well, right outside New Orleans, but we go into the city.
During the festival?
Yeah, for the Louisiana Renaissance Fair in November.
Oh.
Great people down there. I love that show.
You've been known to do North Dakota as well.
Yeah.
You've really triangulated most of the country at this point.
I was able to do North Dakota in 2023. They, last I heard, are still doing in June rather than August, which overlaps with some other shows I do. But I'd love to get back out there at some point because Fargo is actually pretty fun for 3 weeks.
This is such a fun life you guys have.
Yeah, it's not exactly a stable lifestyle.
No, it's not.
But these days when everything is in upheaval all the time anyway.
There is no stable lifestyle anymore.
You might as well do what you enjoy, right?
We haven't needed survival jobs since 2015, so we must be doing something right. Yeah. It's a very Spartan existence. Yeah. Like you're looking at our whole apartment basically, but
What was your pivotal moment when you decided that the Sketch of New York idea was
this is a good story.
Beyond an idea?
So,
let's go back to that story.
Let's go back to 2015. This is 10 years ago. 2015, Darien and I, we'd been dating for 2 years at that point.
A year and a half, 2 years.
2 years at that point, and living together. And
we were working the actors' typical survival jobs.
Which is even more Spartan than now.
We were doing things like we were dinosaur tour guides at the Bronx Zoo that summer.
Occasional theater gigs, but never anything that paid, never anything that did anything that was worth our consistent gig at the Renaissance Fair, which was good. But we scraped the bottom of the barrel. We did the desperate actor gig.
Some people enjoy that gig.
Some people do. I kind of did. I actually kind of did.
I knew you would.
Yeah, because I've just got that personality.
Yeah.
But we spent a Christmas season as elves at Macy's Santaland. I still have the socks. And
the Santaland Diaries is extremely accurate.
Yes, it is. Look up the Santaland Diaries by David Sedaris. It's like 30, 40 years old at this, probably longer than that, 40-something years old at this point, but it's all true. Every word is true. And, including Santa, he does exist.
Yeah, he's real.
He's real. 40 years later, he's got to be Santa. Anyway, but he wrote a very, it's all true. It's all true. I'll just say that. We were scraping the bottom of the barrel, but we did good at it. We enjoyed it. There's still a rule named after me, apparently. We only did it the 1 year, but you to this day cannot wear your hat backwards, because that's what I would do. I would wear my elf pom-pom hat backwards so that it was dangling in my face, and I'd make a big old comedy Lotzie out of going, trying to get it out of my face. And it was fine. Kids loved it. Now management hated it. But suffice to say, it was a soul-crushing job. Working at Macy's Santaland, you're basically a photo assistant. But suffice to say, as far as the Sketch of New York is concerned, we are here getting our souls crushed by this job. I had just figured out that I was trans. I wouldn't do anything about it for 7 years, but I had just figured it out. We had lost our last survival jobs. This was our only paycheck. This was our only gig, and the time was up Christmas Eve. We were going to be jobless, destitute, desperate, and panicked on Christmas in 2015, and it was the bottom of the barrel. And Darien describes, we had this gig together, and we often were scheduled together, and describes how she walked into the break room one day, and nobody else was there except me. And I was sitting there with my hat in my hands. Just...
The picture of, like, desolation. There's nothing sadder than being a 30-year-old elf at Macy's Santaland.
Point being, I'm sitting there with my hat in my hand, and she comes over to me, and she's like, "Hey, honey, are you okay?" And I just
you don't look so good.
And I just look up at her, and I say, "I can't do this anymore."
But she had been, like, we had talked about previous stage work we'd done, and she had talked about this long-running show that she had been the assistant director on with another director that no longer ran, but she was, like, familiar with the concept of doing a long-running show with a new cast and, like, how that was a viable idea for a theater company.
When I first moved to the city, the very first gig that I ever got was a sketch comedy show at a small theater, actually about 2 blocks away from where we live right now and only 1 block away from the Producers Club where we produce our show. And I got the gig, and during the 2-week rehearsal process for that show, I managed to talk my way into a permanent position at that theater. So I stayed on, I did everything the place required, painting the place, hanging lights, running box offices for him, writing his emails to make it sound like he could string together 2 thoughts in a grammatically correct manner, teaching him how to use a computer, by which I mean I must have taught that man how to copy and paste 500 times, and when necessary, being a ringer for his sketch comedy show that I had already done, whenever he needed extra people in it to play the male roles, which now, over a decade later, is something I find very funny. But when he stopped doing that sketch comedy show, he started doing a different sketch comedy show, and by then I'd been his full-time assistant long enough, he kind of made me the AD of that show. And that sketch comedy show is kind of the direct ancestor of A Sketch of New York. And I worked for him for about 2.5 years, all told, and then struck off on my own to make it in the entertainment industry.
So Joe was familiar with this format.
Met Darien, we started dating, got gigs at Macy's Santaland. Fast forward, and I'm sitting there saying, I can't do this anymore. I can't do day jobs. I can't scrape like this anymore.
But she had been saying to me off and on.
But I do know how to do one thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that January, we went to the Producers Club and say, "Hey, Freddie, how's business? Remember me? We rented your theaters a few times after the guy who ran that theater lost his theater. So, I know how to do this. Can I rent a theater for January?" He said yes. We did the very first ever Sketch of New York. It was in many, many, many ways a complete disaster.
that was at this point we've been doing it for long enough that we have like a system and we know what we're doing. The first time we did it, we did not have a system.
No, we did not. We did not know what we were doing.
It
was a total mess.
But, it was a learning experience, and it actually went surprisingly well, given the number of things that went wrong.
We were able to keep the doors open. And we said, hey, we can actually keep the doors open enough to do this again in February. And then we did it again in February. And then we did it again in March. And fast forward a decade, Sketch of New York Productions has been in operation. This is our 10th year of operation now. With the notable exception of 1 2-year pause for rather obvious reasons, we have been doing shows consistently, roughly every 3 weeks, ever since that date. We've never taken time off. We've never voluntarily... 1 month. We took 1 month off voluntarily, mostly because you were in Louisiana for the Renaissance Festival. But ever since then, we've done hundreds and hundreds of shows, worked with thousands and thousands of actors. People tell me that Sketch of New York is a New York City rite of passage. It's like Law and Order used to be back in the day. You're not really an actor unless you have done a Sketch of New York, people tell me. And that honors me, honestly. People tell me stories all the time of people saying, yeah, I worked with so-and-so, and they said, holy crap, I did a Sketch of New York 6 years ago. I did it like a year and a half ago. That's so exciting. What roles did you play? I played one of these roles. I played one of those roles, too. That's a really great role, right? I'm so glad we have this moment of commonality that we can share in common with each other. Yeah, it's so fun. Now we're building a collective rapport with each other that allows us to jumpstart the New York theater community in all the ways that the Sketch of New York says and all their community agreements really works out. That's really fun. Yeah, holy shit, Joe can talk a lot, right? I know, I thought she'd never shut the fuck up. What do you mean she? When did that happen? It's really beautiful.
You are impossible. So fun.
But that's what we do.
Okay, so what were the first challenges that you faced at the very beginning of the Sketch of New York time?
Scheduling.
Yeah.
That's the first one.
Yeah.
Scheduling the theater or the people? The
people.
actors.
The people.
Scheduling the actors.
How do you
Scheduling
find
the theater.
your actors?
That is still one of our biggest challenges still. Because we work with usually about 30 to 40 people every time.
Usually.
30-something people.
Ish.
It's incredibly difficult to get people to communicate clearly about their schedules. But at least we know now to ask.
Yeah.
Because
the first time we didn't.
no, we had auditions and we cast the best 30-ish people that came in to audition. And then without asking their schedules, we got things like, yeah, I'd love to do the show. I'm going to be out for 2 of the 3 rehearsal weeks. Can you still work with that? And because
no.
we
did try.
Because we didn't know enough to like keep people on the bench and say, okay, if we don't cast these people, these first bench people, then we have people to call in if they don't.
We have a system
accept.
now. We didn't have a system then.
We just had to go with the people that we cast because they were the best, even if their schedules were extremely restrictive. And we had people have scheduling conflicts come up midway through the process and
which
drop
always
out.
happens.
We had to have supplemental auditions because we lost so many people, which we've never needed to do again.
No,
that was the only time we've had to do that.
We didn't have more than 5 people in the room for any single one rehearsal.
No, that was specifically for the late cast.
That's true, but still.
And I don't know why that was, but that happens sometimes every once in a while.
Well, also, I think what may have been a factor is I'm sure people who have done a Sketch of New York in the past 2 years always marvel and say, you guys are so tight, you're so crisp, you have a system, you know what you're talking about, and the notes are so perfect. You always tell us everything. That was not the case the first time. The first time, it was some schlubby-looking guy in basketball shorts and a graphic tee who barely knew what he was talking about, trying to parrot talking points that he remembered from a couple of years ago. And this poor girl on the laptop going, what are you saying? Keeping up? And
that was before I had any of the bookkeeping systems that I've made from scratch.
So we were also deeply unconfident and didn't really know what we were talking about. And I'm sure, and also the very first day I had to run to an audition, which was also pretty unprofessional. So we made a lot of mistakes that I'm sure people saw and said, these guys do not have their shit together. Sorry, no. And I'm not gonna... And fair. It was a learning curve. There was a learning curve.
Obviously, but I think it takes a lot of courage and faith in something.
You call it courage. You could easily be desperation.
Vision.
There's very little difference.
You keep going, right? Regardless of how you felt and how things turned out, and then along the way you learn.
Well, and honestly, that was one of the biggest things, is that despite all of the issues that we had with that first run, it still went off really well.
It still kind of worked out.
The people we worked with were very professional, really good.
The ones who stuck around.
Yeah. The scenes themselves were good, which, I was skeptical because...
Yeah, you thought it was going to suck. I wrote the whole thing in a month. After that, I can't do this anymore. I wrote the entire flagship show.
Less than that. You wrote it in 2 weeks. You just sat down and banged out the whole thing.
We've tweaked it since then. We're always improving
sure.
it. But
that original rendition of it, you wrote in 2 weeks.
And Darien thought it was going to suck.
Yeah, I did. There are certain scenes that don't look good on paper.
They really don't.
That's just true of scripts in general. You really can't read a script on paper and see how it's going to read in person. So there were a few of these scripts that I was like, I don't know if this is good.
Especially because we work in satire. And satire as an art form is really susceptible to that. You read something on paper, and especially if you just are playing it the way it is actually written on the page, sometimes it doesn't land. Sometimes it actually actively seems problematic. Sometimes you need notes sometimes in order to make some of these scripts. Oh, that's how it's meant to be played. And anyone who's ever done a Sketch in New York knows that we have an extremely pedantic and annoying system that involves me talking a lot for the first 3 days. I front load notes because a lot of the scripts need it. Because if you just give it to somebody in a vacuum without context, yeah, this doesn't really work. And then once that's how it works, and then they figure it out. But satire's tricky like that. So satire is in many ways extremely flexible. It's an art form that a lot of comedy not everyone can do. You need a certain sensibility to do certain kinds of comedy. But if you can act at all, you can do satire, because it is meant to be played hyper-realistically. Really played like drama in many ways. So if you can act at all, you can do satire. But it is challenging to give the context on how to play some of those things, if that makes any sense at all.
So I was skeptical of
so
some of these scripts.
Yeah.
But, once you give them to good actors and they come alive, I was like, oh, this is actually good. This is actually really good. The actors themselves had fun. The audience had fun. Freddie was surprised.
Freddie was surprised. He knew I knew how to do it logistically, but that's very different from doing it in practice.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like it's bragging to say I think I do it better than my old boss ever taught.
And we made
He played fast and loose with ethics, and that's the exact opposite of what we do. Ethics are paramount in our mission statement.
We made enough money that first round to rent the theater a second time, and we've been able to keep it running that way.
Cried. I don't know if I ever told you that.
Oh, baby.
The very first show, when it actually worked and we got the first laughs, I was crying in the booth like, oh my God, it works.
What is the role of New York itself in the sketch of New York?
I love this city.
Yeah.
I unironically love this city. I am such a romantic for New York City in all the ways, and in many ways, this show only works because of New York City.
We have a certain culture. We have a certain cultural background.
One of the things that is both funniest about New York and makes it rife for being able to be worked with as a subject for satire is, in New York City, this is one of the thickest bubbles in the world. We don't really understand how anyone else in the world lives, and we know they don't understand how we live either.
And this is something
and we're kind of proud of that.
I get to experience this touring a lot. I get reminded every time I leave the city. Like when I'm in Louisiana for 6 weeks, the world is different out there. The country, at least, is
we don't drive.
Very different out there. Yeah, I don't have a driver's license, so as soon as I leave the city, I'm like locked in my friend's backseat.
So I noticed the first day of our rehearsal, when we start doing the thing, you ask everybody to tell their funny story, a funny story from New York.
New York stories. Yeah.
What is your reason for that?
Because it's a variety of things. First of all, it's a great bonding exercise. It's because a bunch of people who've never met each other before, they're sitting in a room, and they don't know this show isn't going to suck. They don't know anything. And a bunch of strangers in the room with them.
It's a good icebreaker that doesn't require, like, come up with 2 adjectives that start with the first letter of your first name.
Yeah. And it also really drives home kind of what the entire show is about. Everybody has these New York stories, and we can bond over them, yes, but also they automatically, oh man, that sketch, I've had that happen to me, and it is relatable. It allows the cast to relate to each other, and it automatically puts them in the headspace that they will need for this show. And they did it themselves. I didn't have to talk anymore. I talk enough. Yeah.
It is a way to get Joe not talking for the first half hour of the day so it doesn't feel so overwhelming.
While giving them the context and premise of everything they're going to do.
Also, peek behind the curtain logistically. The more people talk, the easier it is for me, the person writing their names down, to remember who they are.
Part of the reason that our system is the way it is, I talk as much as I do for a reason. It's not just because I love the sound of my own voice. It's quite the opposite. I'm trans. It stresses me out, actually. But I talk a lot on the first day, largely to give Darien time to aggregate notes and put them into our spreadsheet and software and system that we use to make sure that everyone is equivalently distributed throughout the course of the show, and that everything takes, and then all the roles that we end up giving them, because we can't cast in advance, because we don't know how many people are actually going to show up or not, because we learned the lessons of our first days, based on what will benefit them the most. Like, sometimes people tell as a part of a New York story, they'll say, oh yeah, You want to hear a terrible New York story? Here's a story of this guy that I dated who did these horrible things, and we hear that story and go, got it, we're putting them in A Good Man Is Hard to Find.
Yep.
Some people tell us, I just moved to New York City from Los Angeles. Great, so we're going to give them role number 2 in 5 Actors Walk Into a Bar, because one of the last lines in the show is fuck LA. And that's going to automatically something that's going to help them connect to it and give them more feelings about it. Everything we do is for a reason. And we are very firm believers in disclosure and transparency in our process. Our mission statement as a 501c3 is to elevate and empower the New York City theater community. Every single word that comes out of both of our mouths is done for a very specific reason, and for the benefit of the show and the benefit of the actors, even if they don't realize it.